Welcome to episode 24 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with kundalini yoga teacher Katie Sedgewick. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom from rigid diets, painful body image, and never-ending cycles of self-help and self-improvement. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Was so fun and so out of the blue, and you'll hear me describe what happened as we get into the conversation, but Katie is a friend I connected with during my recent kundalini yoga teacher training, and I'll be honest, I don't make friends or connect super easily. And even doing this weirdest of the weird yoga thing, I still kind of felt like an awkward outsider, and during class, I'd usually be either right up front and like as close to the amazing Guru Singh, our teacher, as I could be, or hiding somewhere in the back amongst people's backpacks and eating fruit and hoping nobody would talk to me. So somehow Katie and I became friends, and it was such a lovely connection. And beyond that, on the final day of training, she began to tell me a story that caught me so off guard that I made her stop and hold it for the podcast. So I'm going to make you wait too, and I trust that if you're a returning listener, you're going to love the conversation. Also, if you are a returning listener and you've found value in these conversations, it would be super, super amazing if you could hop over to iTunes and leave a review. Now, before we dive in, I'll mention you'll hear a book mentioned that is a short ebook that I wrote a couple of years ago called The Eat to Feel Good Diet. And I put it together as my version of intuitive eating, as I was seeing a lot of pitfalls in the intuitive eating community, and I had my own perspective that I wanted to share. So if you want to get this little book for free, you can sign up for newsletter updates at freespirit-academy.com. Now, let's dive in. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Katie Sedgewick. I remember it was the last day of our kundalini yoga teacher training, and we were getting professional pictures taken, and groups of us were sitting outside in the sun, and it was like one of the first days where the sun was amazing, and we were putting on these gold sparkly stick-on tattoos, and there was all of this celebration. And somehow you started telling me about how you'd unintentionally lost a bunch of weight, but nobody would believe that you hadn't done it on purpose. And my ears perked up and I was like, wait, what? And you started telling me what happened. And I was like, oh my God, I wrote a book on exactly what you did. And that's what I teach my clients. And you did it completely intuitively. So what is the story? And I made you stop. I was like, don't tell me anything. We need to talk about this on the podcast.
Yeah. So what had just happened is, you were right. We had just gotten our photos taken, and with the AIR group, right? We were the AIR group. And Sada Simran, who's my beloved yoga teacher, who's in his 60s and has known me now for a few years, pulled me aside and asked me for the third or fourth time, like, what have you been doing to lose weight? You look great. And I keep telling him the truth, which is I'm not doing anything. And he's like, well, how much have you lost? And I told him the truth. And that is, I don't know. And he just was incredulous, like, quit holding back. Like, what is it? There's no way you're just losing this weight. And actually it is the truth. And that's what I came out to tell you, was that, this actually happens to me all the time. And it happens with people who I've known for a long time. And I have lost, I don't know how much weight, but I have, because I quit weighing myself.
Weighing yourself. Oh, that's amazing.
And I'll tell you about that. That changed everything. I don't know how much, but I will say I've lost 4 dress sizes. I've done it pretty effortlessly for the first time in my life. And what I started to tell you, and what I typically don't tell people, because I tell a smaller version of it, but they tend to be frustrated with my answer. And that is, I didn't really have a diet. The truth is, I spent my entire childhood, my entire life, really, from about age 8, when I started putting on weight, until about maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, I spent my whole life, trying and failing at losing weight. And when I was about 8, I think all of the stress of my of my home life started weighing on me. And as a lot of people do in America, we cope by consuming.
Yes.
And I started consuming food all the time. And I had no real understanding of what foods were real and what foods were processed and what would make me lose weight or gain weight. And so I just ate what tasted good. And I ate because of my feelings. I remember looking forward to meals and, looking forward to going out to eat and just being really hyper focused on eating. And in a way that I believe now was trying to comfort, myself and try to ease some spiritual and emotional pain that I was going through as a child that I didn't even know that I was experiencing and I didn't really have the words for. And so I just developed that pattern starting around age 8 and then just held tight to it for most of my life. And I spent most of my life hating myself. I would look in the mirror and I would just see a fat person and a fat girl in particular. And, that society taught me that was completely and utterly unacceptable and that I, should be ashamed of myself. And I was. And so that was basically, my life when it came to looking in the mirror and loving myself, is that I could love different aspects of myself, but I could never really love my whole self because when I looked in the mirror, I hated what I saw. Mm-hmm. And, that motivated me. I remember as a young child, I would try to lose weight, but I didn't really know how. And there were no adults really helping me or paying attention or guiding me.
So there was no comment, like, did your parents comment on the weight gain or the eating, or was it just completely ignored?
A little bit, but they weren't ever cruel, which I'm very happy about. They weren't helpful, they didn't, but they didn't themselves know either how to lose weight, if I'm being honest. They didn't.
And I almost think that there are ways in which that is better, because I've seen a lot where kids have parents that intervene and it turns out far more extreme, because then it feels like, well, even like I don't accept myself and my parents don't accept me either. And they're trying to change me and I'm trying to change me. And I don't know, maybe the hands-off approach is, maybe it's not better, but I think that there are kind of pitfalls, hard things on either side.
No, actually, I'm really grateful. Because it was always, okay, they did not know that it was a spiritual situation. And so they couldn't have helped me. And so by even saying anything, it would have added to the pain of the whole thing, embarrassment of the whole thing. Because even if they were to teach me how to eat with calories, it wasn't about self-control.
Right.
And so it's just the reason why once I was old enough to pick up a book about a diet, my first diet, I followed all of those rules. It wasn't about self-control. And so even if they would have told me, put me on Weight Watchers or told me about calories and intake and output and all the whole nine, it still wouldn't have solved it. So,
no, of course not, because, and like you were saying earlier, as consumption, as a sort of coping, and in America too, and probably in a lot of places, restriction is also a way of coping. And we can go back and forth from, I feel really safe on this tight diet plan, to like being completely off the diet plan and eating emotionally, and both are ways of coping.
Absolutely. So I'm actually really grateful. Thanks for bringing that up. I actually am very grateful that my parents they accepted me. There were a couple moments I can remember, but ultimately, I was pretty protected and loved regardless of my weight. I don't ever feel like, it was me that was rejecting myself for the most part. It wasn't really
it wasn't your fault. Like, we're culturally steeped in it. You didn't just come into the world thinking there was something wrong with you.
Not at all. I was just looking at magazine covers and, everything about a girl and a woman was supposed to be a certain image, and I was not that image. And I was not obese by any stretch of the imagination. I was just heavy. I was just a chubby, chunky kid, but of course the way I saw myself was a different way. I look back on my pictures of myself now as a kid, and I'm like, oh, you were just, chunky, but I would have described myself as hideous. I thought that I was just so unlovable and unattractive. Truly rejected myself for the weight that I did have. So it was an interesting dynamic.
How old were you when you picked up that first diet book?
Let's see. Well, I remember before I got to the diet books, I would try to like run, you know, I remember like trying to get exercise. I thought that that was the key, you know. I know so much of it now is really truly about, you know, your relationship to food and yourself. But I remember just trying to run laps in my backyard, you know, just out of self-hatred and self, you know, disgust. That didn't work. And I was probably about maybe 11 at the time. And then I was able to really get my first diet in work around high school. And I was very successful. I lost a lot of weight. I was a sophomore in high school. I had a car so I could go to the gym and I could buy my own food. I had a job and I could go to the grocery store and really control all aspects of my lifestyle. And I did. And I lost a lot of weight. And it was good. It was very gratifying. And I not only did I feel good about myself because I felt like I was in control, but then I also saw everybody's reaction around me change. And it was definitely very positive, you know.
That's one of the hardest things about food, or, you know, any sort of restriction around food being the coping mechanism, is that it is encouraged.
Oh, absolutely.
And don't worry about you.
And it's so funny how they'll totally insult you to your face without realizing it, right? Because like I remember when I lost all the weight, people would tell me how like good I looked, but basically tell me how bad I used to look.
Right, which gives you this constant fear that like, oh my God, what if I go back there?
Yeah. And I also was like it was weird because it didn't really strike me as a fear. It struck me as rude. I remember thinking like, wow, you're really revealing yourself to me.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean? Like I was like, wow. Like I remember thinking I'm still me, you know, like geez.
Yeah, I think that's just what we're conditioned. You comment on weight loss.
Weight loss
is a good thing, bar none. So we comment on it, and nobody really thinks, I shouldn't say nobody, I'm generalizing, but as a general thing, people don't think before they open their mouth. It's this automatic, oh my God, you lost weight. You look so amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. And it was also too, everybody gets real excited when you're working out, or whether or not it's in a healthy way. You know, it's like, no matter what, if you're hitting the gym, it's self-discipline, right? And it's health.
Yeah, and that's prized. You being disciplined means you are good. You're being so good.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I definitely got my first taste of that, which was interesting in my senior year of high school. And then of course, like I knew that I had it licked forever. All of my weight problems were gone. You know what I mean? Like thank God it only took me until I was 16. And then my ego got, you know, kicked in a notch. And as soon as I could be, you know, as soon as I had resources, I figured this out, you know, like it wasn't really me. This is really me. And as soon as I was able to drive and buy my own food and read for myself, I was able to finally get to the real version of me, you know.
Right. Isn't that so interesting? And I think that this is why self-help is so pervasive, because I'm often encouraging people, like, don't focus on the weight loss. I know it's hard. I know you may want it, but focusing on it isn't going to get you there. Because when we focus on it like that, it's like, I won't be happy until I get this. And then you get it and you are happy. That's the thing. That's what's so deceptive, is you feel on a surface level very happy, very proud of yourself, very self-loving. It feels like, oh my gosh, like you said, this is me. I found me. But you know it's not real because you didn't have that feeling before. Like the journey didn't feel that way. You didn't love yourself to begin with. So if you were to, quote, go backwards in any way or put the weight back on again, you don't love yourself. So it's not real self-love.
It's so conditional. It's so conditional. You know, it's this idea that you can only love what is perfect, you know, and it's such bullshit because
or what our current society says is perfect.
Exactly. But that is, I mean, to me, that's you know, I'm not even going that far. To me, it's like, that is perfect, right? Unless I'm perfect, I'm not lovable. That is what I say to myself. I don't even question what perfect is, right? That's obvious. Perfect is obvious, right? So, you know, and I don't, it's such bullshit because I always afforded those around me, you know, the ability to be loved without being perfect. You know, I've never been that way. I've never expected my friends or my family to be perfect in order for them to gain my love and approval. And yet, you know, when it comes to me, it's perfection or, you know, self-hatred, especially when it comes to looks. Hold on just one moment. My dog is trying to get there. He wants to be a part of this conversation.
Hi, puppy.
He heard we're talking about love and that's his favorite topic. Come on. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So yeah, I definitely had that first taste of, you know, giving myself the self-love I had craved my whole life, but only was it available when I was in this idea of perfect.
Yes.
but I did give it to myself, but it wasn't really real, right? Because it was that conditional love. It was that, but it felt good anyway because I was craving it, that approval from myself. I was craving it.
Yeah, I'm always saying like people get so on this, like I'm going to feel so good and I'm going to love myself so much when I get this body. And I'm always like, yeah, you know what? Like life in a body that you love is really good. It's really, really great to walk around just being content in your skin. However, we can't put conditions on that.
Absolutely. Well, and it took me years to figure that out. So basically I can fast forward. I mean, just this cycle of different diets, I've gained the weight back,
What was the
spoiler
first
alert.
time like? Because you were young, you were in high school, you're going through this cycle for the first time. When did you start to put on the weight again? What did that do to your self-esteem, your self-love?
College. And what did it do to my self-esteem and self-love? That this is interesting. I gained it back when I had my first long-term relationship, and I started, getting those feelings of self-loathing back. But then I sought out that approval from my boyfriend. I thought, well, he's still with me, therefore I must be lovable. And I remember I did a lot of projecting on that, which helped, I think, a little bit, if I'm being honest. If I were single at the time, it probably would have been even worse. But I think there was some sort of like, instead of just accepting myself, I thought, well, he still accepts me, therefore I must be on some level lovable or acceptable.
And in a way, that was, I mean, like you're saying, there is beauty in that. That wasn't wrong. That was a step beyond what you had done before. Saying like, well, at least if this person loves me, I'm lovable, not just if I'm perfect, I'm lovable. It's not maybe the ultimate in unconditional love, but it's a step.
No, it's true. And I think it really did it did help the blow in a big way. I think had it not been for my being able to project any kind of love and acceptance through him, which is all I was doing, I think it would have been even harder for me. But it was disappointing, and it definitely was. I lost a lot of confidence and a lot of self-approval for sure. But I didn't, have that. I did feel like kind of a layer of something through that relationship. And then I broke up with him, and then it was like the self-loathing was just super, super intense. And because I still hadn't lost the weight.
And what did that look like? Were you waking up and looking in the mirror and just telling yourself different things? Did it impact the way that you carried yourself or engaged with the world?
Yeah, it did. I was just thought that I was just super unattractive and unlovable. And at the same time, I was, really wanted to be in a relationship. I wanted to have a partner. And so I was, in my early 20s, and I felt like I was just super unattractive, and yet, really interested in finding romance, finding love, and finding a partner. And I wasn't looking for like one night stands. I was definitely looking for a partner. And, those are two hard things to hold in your head at the same time. I want to find something that I deserve, and yet I deserve nothing because I'm so hideous. And, I didn't do well with that. I got really, desperate. I felt really a lot of self-loathing and a lot of insecurity. And that led me to another diet, which I lost a lot of weight on. And that was Weight Watchers that time. And I lost a lot of weight, and I was getting a lot of approval and a lot of attention from men. And so that felt good. And then, it just fast forward. Then I was, my whole life, this was in my early 20s. I just kind of went in and out of weight issues, right? I tried every diet out there. I really believe I've tried every diet. I'm sure there are still some that I have not tried, but all the main ones, right? The Atkins, the, Weight Watchers.
Did you do like raw foods? Did you?
Oh, yes, I did that. Yep, I did raw foods. You name it. All the big hitters I tried. A Mediterranean diet. I don't know, all the main ones. And I think we did South Beach. I mean,
and were you ever like? Did you struggle with binge eating? Were you still eating emotionally? Because I know that was the first thing in childhood. Was that still kind of weaving its way in and out there?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's definitely the root of it all, is that I was eating because there was a spiritual void in my life. I gave up. I became an atheist basically at 6 for the most part.
Did you come from a spiritual background?
Not really. My mom grew up Catholic, And she walked away from that. My dad was an atheist. My mom walked away from being a Catholic as a young adult, but then she felt like she wanted us to be a part of something. So she took us to different, we were always changing churches, but they were just basically a variety of different Protestant churches. And, I remember one day I was 6 years old and it was a Presbyterian church, and my Sunday school teacher wasn't there. So I had to go into the main preacher, listen to the main sermon. And I was a hyperactive kid because I had a thyroid condition that gave me a lot of energy. Plus that's my personality. I like to have fun. I'm more of a, let's go have fun kind of spontaneous person in general. And, so at 6 years old, with having a lot of hyper energy and just having that general disposition, I was always being told by adults, like, sit down and be quiet, sit down and behave, don't have fun, just sit down. And, I misunderstood the sermon. So the sermon was about, the preacher got up there and said, it's not just enough that you do the right things, that you don't sin, that your behavior isn't, sinful. You can't or Jesus hears your thoughts. So you need to really be thoughtful about the words that you think. Well, I was 6 years old. So the way that my little mind interpreted it was, it's not good enough that you behave yourself.
Yeah.
You can't even want to have fun.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. Yeah. That's what I heard. And I thought, that is so unfair. I remember just sitting there going like, it's so unfair. I'm not even allowed to want, like, I felt like so confined. I felt like I'm not even allowed to want to have fun. Like I have to I felt like they were asking too much. And so I rejected Jesus right then and there. I was like, well, I don't want anything to do with Jesus. Get out of my head, Jesus. Like,
I am always so blown away by children who early on hear the bullshit that a lot of religions put out, because I bought the whole thing. Like I bought it so thoroughly. I did missionary work until I was in my late teens, and I hear people's stories and I'm like, how did you have the clarity as a child, especially when all of the adults around you, like the safety around you, believes this certain thing and you're just like, nope, doesn't make sense.
Well, without getting too into it, I can tell you that I didn't really think the adults around me were safe.
Interesting.
So I never respected authority.
Wow.
Ever. And it still is one of my issues, is I don't appreciate or respect authority. So if you know me, you know that that's a theme in my life. And it's because I had interesting adults around me that I thought were not acting like adults, and they weren't. And so I didn't have a ton of respect for my parents' perspective or adults' perspective in my life. And I tended to be a pretty independent thinker. And so, that's part of why it's like to me, I didn't look to them or seek them as comfort, or they weren't comforting actually. And they caused a lot of drama and chaos in my life. They didn't actually help with it. So, so at 6, I just was like, not happening. Maybe I can't have fun, but I can at least want to have fun. You can't take the joy from my heart, Jesus. So, I know that wasn't even the message. It's so funny.
That's so funny.
I know. So then I rejected God at 6. And so, I had a huge spiritual void. And then my whole growing up then, I grew up in Ohio where there was a ton of Christianity around me. My whole spiritual identity was being against things, which is not really that fulfilling. So I wasn't just like an agnostic. I was an atheist. You know what I mean? Like I did not believe in this crap. And I was angry that everybody couldn't see how stupid the whole thing was. And so, I think that I had this spiritual void that I was trying to fill my whole life. And, because, when there's no God and you can't trust your parents, then it's all on you.
Right. And if you don't care for yourself, or if you're trying to get to a certain place before you love yourself, then that's really unsettling. Like there's no foundation there.
No, there's no room for anything. I mean, it's all on me, and there's no self-love. So and
you're constantly disappointing yourself.
Yeah. It wasn't a really fun place to be. So the weight issues persisted, and I was filling my spiritual and emotional void with food. And then I would hate myself for the way I looked. And so that kind of just went on for most of my life, until about 4 years ago. I would say maybe 3 years ago. And that's when things changed. And what happened was I was, kind of going through my own personal crisis in my life that had nothing to do with weight. It had to do with just being, super angry and super frustrated. And I felt like I knew I was going down a really bad path. And I just was so dissatisfied with every part of my life. And I was projecting all of my dissatisfaction on everybody around me, on my job, on my marriage, on my family, on everything. I was just like this angry, frustrated, dissatisfied human being. And I knew enough to know that I was going down a bad path, and I didn't really know how to put the brakes on it. And I was running around a track, an indoor track that my work provides. And it was on a weekend. It was on a Saturday. So nobody was there. And I just started crying. I just broke down and I got on my knees and I surrendered to a God I truly did not believe in. I just knew that I couldn't keep down this path, and I didn't know how to move forward. And I had to surrender. And so I really did surrender to a God I did not believe in, but I just felt like I couldn't go another. I literally was running away from myself and I just couldn't go another step. And that really shifted things in my life profoundly. I mean, not all at once, but it was really, to me, that was like that was a light switch. And from there, I started being open to different spirituality things. So the first person that I read, I don't know if you've heard of her before, but maybe one of your listeners have. Her name's Louise Hay. Do you know who Louise Hay is? Of course, yeah. Oh, so I did not. And I was 31 when I was introduced to her. And she it was just so beautiful. She just felt like a really kind mother, a really wise mother. And I just really connected with her and her writing and her words about self-love and affirmation. It just was like this well of nutrition, spiritual nutrition that I had been longing for my whole life. And so I started down that path, and that opened my mind up enough for this idea of a higher power, a God in the universal sense, not like a man in the sky authoritarian sense. Mm-hmm. And from there, I just kept kind of long. I was just dying of thirst spiritually, and I just kept reading more and reading more and reading more. And at the same time that I was looking for, spiritual truth, I also was reading more and more about meditation, and I was terrible at meditating. I tried mindfulness, which is not, I don't know if that's the easiest way to start for other people, but it wasn't for me. My mind was nowhere near ready or prepared or disciplined enough to focus on my breath for any more than just a second at a time. And so around the same time that I found that Kundalini yoga found me, I found myself surrendering kind of as strategy, strategic surrender, this idea that of finding a lot of power in the idea that I don't know what I'm doing and I need help, and that there's a higher, a higher source that can help me. And so one of the things that I came to terms with is that I'm really, really bad at losing weight. Uh-huh.
I
looked in the mirror and I was like, kiddo, you have been trying since you were 8 years old and you are in your 30s now to lose weight, and you suck at this. You're not really good at losing weight. You can lose it for a minute, but let's be honest, you can't maintain this in any way.
Which is totally profound and really insightful, because I will ask women that, I'll ask clients that who are old, 30s, 40s, 50s, and they'll say that. They'll be like, I'm really bad at losing weight, but then it sort of stops there. There's no big picture. I'll ask them, or they'll be trying to go on another diet, and I'll ask them, how long have you been trying to do this? And they'll say 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And I'll be like, I think it's time to try something different. It's amazing how, and I'm not saying this is most people, I'm saying you're kind of extraordinary in this, that you could see oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing over and over again and it isn't working.
Yeah, it was definitely profound. And it was also, there was a little bit of self-pity in that, if I'm being honest. It didn't, it wasn't super empowering. There was a part of me that was look at you, you fool, you can't lose weight. You know what I mean?
Right, but in hindsight, do you see it in hindsight? Or you're wow?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's profound.
Yeah.
Oh, it's profound. Yeah, totally. And it changed everything. That right there, that realization and conversation with myself changed everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while for it to actually get into place, for the whole thing to click, the magic to happen. But that was the beginning. That conversation, that get real conversation I had with myself. And it just felt really authentic. There was something really beautiful about just being honest and real with myself about it. If nothing else, like it felt like there was a truth that resonated in my body when I just said, hey, this isn't working.
Ooh, yes. Yes.
It just felt good on some level just to be like, oh, okay, can we just call it what it is? Like, it's not working.
And that's so important. The way that you said, okay, this feels good. And the truth resonated in my body. I think that we forget, or maybe we're never taught, that truth feels good. And like when you were talking about like the affirmations and the things that you tell yourself, if it's true, it feels good. If it's true, it feels good in your body. Like when you tell yourself, I'm a fat, ugly person or whatever, like that's probably pretty mild compared to what most of us have said to ourselves. That doesn't feel good. Like it makes your body contract. So it can't be true. It can't be true because it doesn't feel good. It's true if you can rest into it. If it's like, oh, that's such a relief. And I guess I should add to that, like sometimes when it comes to looking in the mirror and telling yourself for the first time, like you're beautiful and I accept you, it might not feel good because we have a lot of stories on top of ourselves that we fear that can't be true. And so there's some working down into there, but ultimately to really believe I'm beautiful and I'm whatever, that feels good. That feels nourishing. And so it's true. That's true. That resonates.
It's so true. And I now ask women that I talk to, how does it feel in your body when you think about this? How does it feel in your body when you say this? How does this thing now feel? And it is really the ultimate, was it pendulum, right? You can use a pendulum. Sometimes women do that to like, for yes or no, like you can kind of like the energy it's like your ultimate body pendulum. Like if you can be comfortable and relaxed and peaceful in the idea of this thing, right? Or in the knowing of this thing, then for me, it's truth. I know it's truth. And so, and that was a moment I remember feeling a sense of peace in saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm terrible at losing weight. There was a moment of absolute peace in that. It was also, there was a bit of self-pity, but it was also peaceful. I mean, in some weird way, it was like probably how it feels to admit your marriage is over. It's probably both terrifying and sad. And probably on some level, if it's really over, it probably feels good, for people. And that's how I felt when I admitted that I was terrible at losing weight and that I clearly was kind of I wasn't doing a good job of it. So I thought to myself, okay, what's the next thing? If you can't lose weight, if this is it, if you're just terrible at losing weight, then the next step is, can you be okay with how you are? And I had to, that was not an easy thing. That was not yes, I love myself.
Right.
Yes, this is that, the 27 years you spent like just cultivating self-hatred and you're just going to give that up because you're no good at losing weight. No, it doesn't work that way. So the question on the table was, can you love yourself? If you can never lose another pound, can you be happy in this body?
Oh, that's huge. Oh my God. That's so huge. And I love that you stress how important it is to or that it's a little unsteady at first. Cause I think people think like, I just can't love myself because that seems like this big daunting thing, but it's not like you just jump into loving yourself.
Oh no.
It's like you're able to look in the mirror and be like, well, all right. Like, I guess this is okay. Like that's sometimes just how it starts. Like I can be all right with this, I guess.
Oh, I didn't even start there.
Really? You feel like it was even less than that?
Oh God, no, it was less than 0. Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing is that like, that's really, I started this journey 4 years ago. The weight started coming off in just droves about maybe 9 months ago. But I mean, this was a process of self-love. I mean,
yeah, totally. Oh, and that's so important for people to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always talking about this too. Like it's about self-love. And if your body needs to lose the weight, like I'm not saying self-love is a guarantee for weight loss. I'm saying if you love yourself, you'll learn to listen. And as you learn to listen, you'll learn what your body needs. And if your body needs to lose weight, it will eventually. And there's no time limit on it, which nobody likes to hear that.
Oh, it's so boring. Yeah. I mean, come on, can't you just tell me what to eat?
Right, exactly. Which I think is boring at this point. And I
totally
start going down this path. It's like, oh my God, I could never go back. But and I think more than boring too, it's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Not have a plan, to not know what the outcome is going to be, and to just be like, wait, this is like, this might be it. This is what I'm going to have to live with. But I think that I am pretty certain that any change starts there. Any real shift starts with, you know what, if this is how it's going to be for the rest of my life, I got this. I got myself. I could do it.
I absolutely. And it was, it's because honestly, what I got out of this journey, Randy, isn't weight loss. It is that I absolutely love myself no matter how I look. And that is a gift. It doesn't matter now how I look. Like, that's not the point. The point isn't how I look. Like, here's how I put it. It's like, okay, I get so much good feedback now about how I look. And there was a time in my life where I needed that so much. Like, that would have been worth a pound of gold. I mean, I was seeking that so much. And now when people say that, I'm like, oh, that's nice. Like, but I don't even care. Like, it doesn't matter to me because I love myself. So like, I don't need them to reinforce that to me. Like, it's like, it's nice. And I appreciate they're coming from a good place, but it almost is valueless to me because I love myself. So I don't need it. I fill my own cup up.
Yes.
So, but the funny thing is, it's like, I remember when I was single, I spent a lot of time, looking for a partner, going out to bars and hanging out with friends in hopes of meeting someone. And I felt like whenever I wanted that, my desperation, my level of longing for that was almost like a direct proportion of how much I was pushing that away from me. Right. Like, the more that I wanted it, the harder it was to get. Mm-hmm. And there were several times I remember throughout my life, where I actually decided that I didn't care. And I really, truly meant it. I was not interested in finding a guy. I just wanted to have fun with my friends. I just really wanted to enjoy my life and not worry about it. And it was in those moments where they all came flocking to me.
Yes. It's so,
and you can't fake it. You can't pretend like you don't care, but have one eye open looking, like, you really have to just be like, screw it, I'm not interested anymore. And it's like, then they come out of the woodworks, and it's kind of the same thing with this whole self-love thing. And the way that I look is that, I'm not that focused on how I look anymore. And I've never had better feedback on it, and it's funny. It's this comic joke to me. It's like this cosmic joke. It's just like, as soon as I quit caring, I get it in droves, and it doesn't really matter. Like, and it's fine,
It's not that even you don't enjoy it, I'm sure, but it just feels like frosting. Like, you could be going along fine, and somebody tells you look great or you look beautiful, and it's so like, it's kind of overflowing. You're like, well, I don't need it, but gosh, thanks. That feels so nice.
Yeah, it's almost like a neutral thing to me. Yeah. It's like, I'm like, I understand that you're complimenting me, and that's wonderful, and I appreciate the compliment, but it doesn't feel like anything. Oh God, it just feels like it's interesting. Like, I'm like, interesting.
Yeah,
okay,
totally.
Interesting. Not like, oh wow, that feels good. Like, it's almost like, okay, like, thanks.
That's so interesting. I wonder if, because I'm thinking about this and I'm nodding along, and then I'm thinking I'm different, because I feel like, oh my God, I love hearing. My love language is words of affirmation. So if you give me your love in words, I'm like, oh my God, I'm yours. But also I'm like, I'm good. I don't need it. Like, both at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah. So for me, it's just neutral. Like, I'm not against it or by any stretch. It's just like, it's like if someone said they like your car. Like, I just don't, it's like if you got out of your car and someone said, man, that's the best car. It's a beautiful car. I love that car. You'd be like, oh, I'm glad you like my car. It may not be like something that you really hold tight to. That's how I feel. Like, I'm like, oh, I guess you think I look nice. Like, okay, thanks. You know what I mean? Like, appreciate it. That's just me. It's just,
no, it's really interesting, because we're all going to have different experiences. Like, ultimately you want the base of, you know what, I'm good. I've got my back. I'm good with myself. And then our experience is going to be different beyond that. At what point after you started just sort of surrendering, did you notice the way you were eating shift? Did you notice the way you were moving shift, or did any of that shift?
Well, it did. So first off, it took a long time for me to get to self-love. Like, when I first looked in the mirror, I was actually terrified to even say anything okay to the person in the mirror, because I thought, in a weird way, it was like
damning you to that forever.
No, it was like empowering a monster. It was terrible. It was like, if I say that this is okay, it's going to get worse.
Yes. Yes.
If I give this any kind of reinforcement, it's like, I'm going to go from being, X amount of overweight to like triple it.
Yeah.
because I'm going to reinforce this terrible behavior. If self-loathing can't rein me in, imagine what self-love will do to me. It
Right.
was
Oh my
almost like giving it permission.
Yeah, and for anybody out there who's had this experience, I think it is really important to note that sometimes you don't always you're going in with a lot of not knowing, and it's going to feel like it's going to feel counterintuitive to say to surrender in any capacity. But just the fact that you had done the same thing over and over and over again and it hadn't worked was enough to move you forward. So if anybody has had that pattern of I've done this over and over and over again, I've done this self-hatred thing, I've done this like strict self-discipline thing over and over and over again, and it hasn't worked, it could be worth playing with something a little scary.
Absolutely. And I felt like it was almost reckless to love this person in the mirror.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? I mean, almost reckless. Like, what are you? That's not responsible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's not what we're taught. We're taught it's responsible to be good. Like when you were in church, you have to be good.
Yeah.
So many different things.
It's almost like I felt like what people must feel like to give love to a criminal. Like if it's like condoning it. And then if you condone it, then it'll be worse. That's how it felt to me when I first had to look in the mirror and try to give myself any kind of positive reinforcement.
Well, and that makes so much sense. And I think that people need to realize it. Like it is literally that hard because when we're little, when we're tiny children, we're essentially being programmed. And we have this old, like we have evolved in tribes. And for us to be rejected for a very long time meant death. Rejection from the tribe meant death. So whatever we learned at an early age got us rejected is going to feel like death when we are trying to do it any other way.
Yeah. And so like I said, I started at less than 0. I wouldn't say that I looked in the mirror the first time and said, okay, well, I guess you're good enough. It was more like, even saying you're good enough is scary. Like, am I really want to do this? Like, is this going to make me 400 pounds? Like, it felt reckless. It really did. Because I thought the only reason I wasn't more overweight was because of the self hatred.
Right.
You know? And that if I hated myself maybe more, I could lose some more weight. It was really ugly, so the idea of loving myself seemed like, oh my God, here you go. You think you're bad now. Oh, have fun with this.
So then did you just hang out with that for a while? Like was life kind of just the same and you were playing with this idea of not trying so hard? When did you see things shift, and did they shift really naturally?
No, I knew that I needed to love myself. I knew that. On some level, I knew that it was absolutely ridiculous that I couldn't love myself. Like, I knew it. So it's like, I on some level, I knew it was completely unacceptable that I didn't love myself, and that it was not okay. So I think I held with that idea that it was like this cognitive dissonance. It's not okay that you don't love yourself, but loving yourself could be dangerous. So what do you do with that? And then I sat with it for months, and I knew I just kept trying. I looked in the mirror and I just kept trying. I kept trying, like to love myself. And after a while, it worked, little by little, I was able to start liking myself and start getting used to myself and start appreciating myself. And, that went along with really discovering Kundalini yoga. And
yeah, I really want to ask about that because I was really interested when you said you started with mindfulness, but that was too much. Like just focusing on the breath was too much. And I think that's important. Like people get really lost. They're like, I just can't be mindful. I can't do it. And for me, that was true also. And I realized, and I had done a bit of research, and for a lot of people, like our nervous systems aren't ready to handle what comes up when we just sit and we focus on the breath. Like it is so much. It is too much. And for me, it was like at least, 9 months of Kundalini yoga. And then I knew that I needed to start sitting in just like silent, focused breath meditation. But not until then. So how did Kundalini yoga impact the whole journey, and how did you find it?
Yeah. Well, it found me just like it usually does with people. So I was trying to do mindfulness. I think the reason why mindfulness is so popular is because number one, it's not confronting to the Western idea of religion. I mean, it's really hard to say that listening to your breath is sacrilegious.
I don't know. I do have to say, when I was a kid, I remember so I didn't go to Sunday school. I went to Sabbath school because I was a Seventh-day Adventist. But in any case, Sabbath school. One of my Sabbath school teachers told me that if you stop thinking like the meditators, that's how the devil gets in.
Oh, wow. They really did a number on you guys. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like terrified to stop thinking.
Oh my God. That's awful. That's so neurotic.
Isn't that like the worst thing you can do to a child?
Oh my God, man, that is destructive. Wow. Okay.
So anyways, there's
Wow.
that side.
They
In general, yes, I agree with you.
new and innovative ways to mess with people. Okay. But in general, yes, I think for the reason why mindfulness, out of all the different types of meditations and Eastern spiritual practices of meditation, I think the reason why it became most popular in the United States is because it's fairly non-confronting when it comes to any kind of sacrilegion, right? As opposed to some really interesting Sunday school or Sabbath school teachers, most people aren't terribly freaked out by the idea of trying to focus on one's breath. I don't think it's really easy from a Western lifestyle, though, to start with that because, like you said, we're so far away from that, and we become so unaccustomed to that I think it's hard to start there. I think that's kind of like a midway point. At least for me, that was a midway point. And so I tried to meditate that way. I was totally unsuccessful at it. I knew I still had to meditate, so I Googled yoga meditation because I had done zero yoga at that point, and I thought that yoga and meditation were the same thing in some ways. So I was wrong because a lot of yoga that they teach in the West, at least they don't have a ton of meditation involved in it. But I didn't know that. And so when I Googled yoga meditation, the first thing that came up was kundalini yoga, and I'd never heard of it before. And I thought, that's weird. I've never heard of that before. And then that's all I thought of. I didn't think about it again until about 2 weeks later. I picked up a book by Russell Brand in the Heathrow airport. Yeah. And because I was interested in him from a political standpoint, because I have a political science degree, and was interested in some of the stuff he was talking about at the time, and picked up his book. And in his book, he talks about he's recovering drug addict and yoga enthusiast. So he's tried all drugs and all types of yoga. And he compared each type of yoga to a different type of drug. And he said, like, I can't remember specifically, but Hawthorne was
all I remember is Kundalini. All I remember is he said Kundalini Kundalini is the crack cocaine.
He said Kundalini is the crack cocaine yoga. It blows the doors off. And that was a compliment, apparently, because I've never partaken in crack cocaine, but I knew that he meant that in a very positive way. And so I thought, well, there it is again. There's that Kundalini again. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to try a yoga, I may as well try the crack cocaine of yoga.
You had no yoga background, right?
Never even done a hatha class.
So interesting.
Nothing. So I walked into Siddhasa Rin's class in Seattle, Washington at Guru Gayatri in January of 2015 and changed my life. Never been the same. I found home. I found spirit. I found everything. And it was weird because it was definitely confronting because he was in a turban, a white man in a turban, and there's, religiosity all throughout. And in Kundalini, way more than I think in a lot of different disciplines of yoga, there's definitely more spirituality there. And I have been, again, my whole life, I definitely been against this idea of organized religion or authority. And, but the experience was so profound that, for about 9 months, I kind of argued with myself about whether or not I was joining some sort of weird religious organization. But I had to keep going.
Yeah, it can be so off-putting at first. I think a lot of people that are drawn to it do come from a religious background that maybe we've stepped away from. And so I remember feeling like this at White Tantric last weekend, thinking for the very first moment, I was like, oh my God, I'm in a cult. What am I doing? And then I just sort of felt into the whole space and I was like, no, I'm home. I don't know what this is. I guess I'm a weirdo. Fine. Fine.
I did that so many times, Randy, throughout this experience of 2.5 years now, 3 years. And the truth of the matter is, I've looked at it from all angles and I've met so many people who have been with it for so long. And I've been to Yogi Bhajan's ranch and I've been to women's camp in Espanola, New Mexico. I've kind of seen, a lot of different aspects of it. And from what I can gather, it's like $15 for yoga. That's really their bottom line. They don't really try to sell you. There's nothing really there. So I trust it. It is weird and, but it's also profoundly life-changing. And it's not just been for me and my own experience, but then I've watched my husband go through it. And it's just beautiful to observe and watch the man that I love and my soulmate become the best version of himself. It's just so beautiful to watch it. So
beautiful.
yeah. So, yoga really was, I think, the thing that helped me really embrace and love myself. I was willing and able, and I think I needed to do that to confront myself on an intellectual level.
Yes.
So I was already walking down that path before I found Kundalini. I think Kundalini helped me fill in all the blanks of whatever it took to help me love myself. It helped me heal so much.
I assume it continues to. Like, I mean, where you started, not being able to look in the mirror and barely eke out that you could be okay with this whole thing, to where you're at now, I assume it continues to unfold.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I still have to confront self-love, not usually from a looks perspective. It's never because of looks anymore.
Mm. Like, I don't think it was probably ever about looks to begin with.
Nope.
Maybe just that deep realization that, oh, this isn't even about this.
Exactly. So, I still have moments where, through the beautiful gifts of Kundalini, I get a lot of aha moments, and I get to see about how my behavior and what I bring to the table affects my life. Mm-hmm. And it can be confronting. I don't know if it's been for you, but it has been for me. Some of these realizations are confronting, and, I have to choose over and over again self-compassion as opposed to condemnation. And
this isn't, I don't know, when you think of like a yoga retreat or people sitting around meditating, it seems very blissful. And that's a part of it too, but it is absolutely confronting. If any yoga is confronting, it's Kundalini. Like, it's intended to bring up stuff.
Exactly. And when those things come up, I get the opportunity to love myself, because there's that reflex of self-condemnation is still there.
Yes. And I think too, I wonder if in a way what you did, because something that was important for me is like, so this way back, like I can't even fathom loving myself perspective. Sometimes the place to start is just to be like, you know what? If I can't love myself for the rest of my life, I'm still going to be here. Like, I'm still going to show up. Or like talking to the part of yourself. I think that's it for me, is being able to turn towards myself in my mind and be like, okay, if you hate yourself for the rest of your life, I've still got you. Like, I'm still here. And developing this presence that's here all the time. This voice that's constantly like, I've got you, I've got you, I've got you. And I think that develops when you have that unconditional witnessing of like, okay, so you hate yourself. Okay, so you don't like what you see in the mirror. Okay, so you don't want to show up to yoga today. Okay, so you think you might be a terrible person. Like, I've got you. I've still got you.
Yeah. And for me, it's loving that child within me. That's something that Louise Hay really helped me with. Is it like, it's really hard for me to condemn myself when I'm 2.
Yes.
And I'm still that child. I'm just bigger, but I'm still that soul. I'm still that perfect soul. I look at myself at 2, and anything that I was doing at 2 was just sweet. Even if I was annoying people or whatever, I was coming from a sweet, sweet, open-hearted place, and I'm still that person, and
that's totally it. I think as we go along, we begin to see that innocence within ourselves, that is still who we are. We are still that innocent. And it's just bringing light and bringing clarity to that, and acceptance. Like, it has to be there, or you're not going to see any of it. You're going to continue to see it as warped and bad and wrong, and it's just misunderstanding.
Absolutely. So through the journey of self-love through Kundalini, it really, like I said, it filled in so many blanks. I think the self-love journey would have been even longer, but for Kundalini. And so I'm super grateful that Kundalini came to me and found me. And, because it's just been so profoundly healing. I cannot even begin to describe it. And then through that, like you said, I learned to listen to my body. I learned to eat from the perspective of me in an hour, not me right now. So how am I going to feel in an hour? How am I going to feel in 2 hours? How am I going to feel tomorrow?
You just naturally did that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I got there too. And I figured that out too, but it's interesting seeing somebody else who just kind of figured it out.
Well, I think it makes sense in a way because because you love yourself. Like, let's just think about it this way. Let's just pretend like you're not talking about yourself. Let's just talk about, like, pretend like you have a child that you just love, like profoundly love your child. If you knew that you were feeding your child something that was going to make your child feel bloated and gross and slow and nasty, wouldn't you stop feeding your child that?
Yes. Well, that's exactly it. Because I think what comes along with this self-love piece is you have to be willing to be with yourself in your body. So if I'm loving myself, that means I have to be with myself, hanging out in my body, not checked out somewhere. And if I'm going to be in my body, I want to feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there was a time when I didn't love myself where I didn't really care how I felt, if I was being honest.
Right. Well, I think because then we're constantly checking out and it's like, fuck it. And yeah.
Well, and I was always like, when I was in a moment where I wasn't self loving, I would do things to myself constantly that would screw over my future self. I would drink too much. I
Mm-hmm.
would eat too much. I would put things off, my responsibilities off that I knew that I had to do anyway. I would always be constantly screwing my future self over, because I didn't really love myself. There wasn't, that person in 5 minutes, that person in 5 days, like, you know what I mean? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have a lot of love for that person. And so, when you don't care about the person who exists in next week, then why do you care? Why look out for them?
Ooh, I love that. I love this whole holistic, like you just brought up within 5 minutes, like loving your inner child, loving your 2-year-old self, loving your future self. Like that's how holistic it is. It's like, I love everything I've been through, even if it wasn't smooth or easy, or you wish you maybe would have done something differently. Like you respect everything that you've been through. You love that past part of yourself. You love who you are hanging out in this body today, and you love who you're going to be. Like that's really, it needs to be that whole.
And it is when you have a child. I think if you have a good relationship, if you're able to be a parent, I think, and really have the kind of relationship to your child that's loving, which, I don't think maybe not all parents do, but if you are able to achieve that, I imagine if I really loved my child, I would always want my child to be healthy and happy, and I would forgive my child for all of its, his or her shortcomings, and then want good things for them in the future. That's so natural, I think, to do if you have a good relationship with a child that you've given birth to. But this idea that you would afford that to yourself, I think, can be, for some reason, more challenging. I don't really understand it, but
It's really interesting because I think it comes down to parenting ourselves. Like we've always got this inner child within us that has things that she has yet to understand, and she's expressing in wounded ways and all of this stuff. And I think it's about going back and sort of reparenting that child. And I wonder if maybe parents who have a hard time with their children are extremely having a hard time with that parenting of themselves, and if that we were all able to parent that part of ourselves, if there would just be this whole ripple out effect in all of our relationships.
I think winner, winner, chicken dinner, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I think that the reason why my parents had trouble parenting me is because they had some deep, deep, deep issues, and still do, with themselves. And I love them so, so much because I understand that now.
Yeah, once you see it clearly. And that's the whole thing. I think this is something to wrap up on, is that self-love, I so believe this. I believe self-love is natural. I think it's our natural state when we see ourselves clearly. And to see ourselves clearly, there has to be that acceptance piece, because that acceptance just lets us relax. And then we begin to see like, oh, I am so innocent. And oh, that's what I'm really trying to do here. And that's the need I'm trying to get met. And then it just sort of blossoms. Like, how can you not love from that place? Like, it's not really something we have to try so hard for.
And I completely agree. And if we weren't given that from our parents, it's because they didn't have that to give us. It wasn't because they were holding it back. I really believe that. I think that, your parents, no one can teach you something that they don't have access to themselves.
Right.
You can't teach someone advanced math if no one's taught you advanced math.
Right. And I think that in seeing the innocence in yourself, you begin to see it in your parents and then everywhere else too.
Exactly. And if they didn't give it to you, it wasn't because you weren't worthy.
Right.
It wasn't because you didn't deserve it. It wasn't because you weren't good enough or unlovable or forsaken. It was because they didn't have it to give to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is really the big forgiveness in the whole thing. So
yes. And I love how Guru Singh says, and I was actually talking about this on the very last podcast, that to forgive is just to give yourself forward, to be like, okay, I see that clearly now. This is not going to be like, I can't tell the story over and over again that I'm like this because my mom said this, my mom said that. Like, we're all innocent and we're all wounded. And now that I see that, I can give myself forward. And that's so healing.
Oh, that is beautiful. What a beautiful way to end the conversation.
Well, one more thing to tie this up. I always ask this at the end of the podcast. This being the Free Spirit Academy podcast, I define a free spirit as just getting to be yourself. So like me getting to be me, no judgments, you getting to be you, completely the pure essence of yourself. So when you think of the word free spirit, what comes to you?
When I think of the word free spirit, I just think of a bird being let out of its cage, this idea of expansiveness and limitlessness and openness and possibility.
Oh, I love the bird being let out of its cage. That's so lovely. Thank
Mhm.
you so much. This is so powerful. I'm really excited to share it.
Thank you, Randy.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. For more on food and body freedom, get my free ebook, The Eat to Feel Good Diet, by signing up for newsletter updates at freespirit-academy.com. I will be back with you next week.